Here to speak with me more about Ted Kennedy is Peter Canellos. He is a CBS News consultant. He is with the Boston Globe and recently worked on a book, the editor of the book, The Last Lion, a fascinating Ted Kennedy biography, which I read and thoroughly enjoyed. Peter, good morning to you.
Thank you, Maggie.
You tell so many stories in the book about Ted Kennedy's deep connection to this place where we're standing.
Oh, it's a lifelong passion that he has for Cape Cod and for this place. When he grew up, the Kennedys lived in many different places. They lived in Bronxville, they lived in Massachusetts, they lived in London, but he always came back here. This was his home. He really believed in it.
You were telling me that back in 2004, you stood with him overlooking Nantucket Sound, and what did he say to you?
And he stood out and he waved his hand, sort of encompassing the whole view, and said, "This hasn't changed since I was a child." And you've got to think, for somebody who saw so much change in his life and so much uncertainty, so much tumult, this was a constant for him.
This was the constant in his life.
This was a constant for him.
This was also the place where he sought refuge when there was deep grief. He would always return here, and in fact had to come back here on numerous occasions and deliver very bad news to his father.
Well, this was where he told his father that President Kennedy had died. They assigned Ted that job because Ted had a special closeness to his father. It was also where he had to tell.
Reportedly in a sort of very
say,
matter-of-fact
well, there's been an
way.
accident involving the president, and in fact he died. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard bit of news to deliver to anybody, and Ted Kennedy was very young at that time. He was just 30 years old himself, and
this is also where he had to tell his dad about Chappaquiddick.
He also had to tell his dad about Chappaquiddick here, and I think it was a similarly awkward conversation, but more moving. He apparently broke down and sitting at his father's knees. His father, of course, had a stroke and was unable to talk at that point, so he's talking to a man who can't really respond to him. It's a very poignant thing here.
A man who probably expected him to go on and run for president and carry the legacy of his brothers.
I think that's true, and it was also here after Bobby Kennedy died in 1968 that Ted would go off sailing by himself out on the Sound, and I think in his mind he realized that he was going to be spending the rest of his life living for his father, living for his two brothers, living for his mother, all these ambitious people and all these ambitions now invested in him. And he was the youngest child. He was the warm one, the funny one, but he wasn't the one who was going to lead the family, and he had to for 40 years.
Peter Canellos, thank you so much. We'll share many more stories later in this broadcast.